And in talking about The West Wing, I loved that one of the gentlemen in the episode called it a fantasy, which, boy, by today's standards is totally accurate.
Yeah.
Wow, I was rewatching old West Wing today, just almost like crying, like, oh, just so many reasons.
There's such an innocence about it.
But and there's so much hope, and then you described it as showing both sides as human beings. And I was trying to think of, had there ever been another show about politics that had tried to do that? And I really couldn't, you'd have little caricatures of, characters pop into different shows, but this really was the first show to show us the inner workings of this.
When I first, I lived in Santa Barbara at the time, and Rob Lowe he'd done the pilot, and our kids played ball together, and so we were at some baseball diamond, and he was saying, just this pilot, it's about it's about the West Wing, and it's about, and I thought, great, it's going to be so boring. I mean, it just, and then when he explained it was Aaron and Tommy, and I was a big fan of Sports Night,
right.
And and Tommy he just energized that, and these people, they were all on a mission, and they had a vision of this country, as everybody did who was in Congress, I think, and in the executive branch, and so it was sort of our better selves, I think, is what they had called out to, but I always likened it to sort of a Howard Hawks kind of movie, like, or Roz Russell and Cary Grant and His Girl Friday. It just had an energy to it. The people were smart. They talked fast. They walked fast. They moved through it. So I always thought of it in many ways like a romantic comedy, certain parts of it, and that was the kind of dynamic when we played it. It definitely had that kind of energy in it, because it was all usually done in a single take, especially many of those 2 or 3 page scenes. It was just boom, boom, boom.
Of course, and it's also one of the few shows where men and women have equally great content and material. And that is, I think back to broadcast shows back then. There were some great broadcast shows, but every single character on that show has something important to say and something to do.
Yeah.
There isn't anyone who feels extraneous, which, again, by today's standards, looking back at that time, it's very impressive. So kudos to Aaron and everyone who pulled that off.
You got a hell of a Steadicam operator.
Oh my God.
But and also we heard about
absolutely, yeah. He's a wonderful director now.
And the shadows and the lighting and the glass, that was so interesting to hear what a challenge it was to shoot, because there was so much glass on the set. And there was so much purposeful lighting too.
It was also, on the set, they had TV monitors all around the executive branch. It was always it was CNN. And that was the first show I'd ever been on that would, one, pay the money for that, two, do all the clearances that were required for that.
Right.
But they just said, do it, make it happen. And because otherwise you'd run these B-rolls of junk you'd find, and that was
like
sort of
fake news networks.
Yeah, you'd have some person, you'd shoot that
Literal
stuff.
fake news, yeah.
Right. But it just was the reality context of just walking in there and going, oh, that's CNN, Jesus,
Yeah.
And
it felt real. It felt very real. Yeah. So this era is
I've been at the Post for 90 to 96, covering Washington. I would watch it like a mean drunk, going, it's not like that. And now it would only be that much more so.
Only if it were like that.
Right.
Well, that is the fantasy piece of what we were talking about. So there's something about this era that's so fascinating, and it really, and we mentioned it in the episode, is the showrunner as celebrity. With Glee, I feel like Ryan Murphy really ushered in. We sort of knew who he was with Nip Tuck, and then suddenly he was as famous as his cast. And we saw that with obviously David Chase, Ryan Murphy, Matthew Weiner, Shonda Rhimes, and our Vince. And Kim, I'm wondering, how do you think this changed the way that journalists and critics wrote about television? Were people suddenly not able to separate themselves from the person who created the show? And did that person's notoriety, I guess, affect the way we watched it?
I think certainly there was a celebrity showrunner. I don't think that was a thing before. Can anybody think of that?
Norman Lear's.
Bochco
and Milch.
That's it.
Hitchcock.
That's it. Very, very.
But I still don't think Milch and Bochco were household names. I don't think in the 80s and early 90s.
Bochco kind of was, I think.
People may have known, but I don't think it's as much as what we saw.
I mean, I was something of a Bochco groupie at that point. But yeah, David Chase, you knew he had that kind of power and control, and David Simon, nobody knows better than you how easy these people like David Milch and David Simon are to work with. Yeah. They had, it's a thing that on my show, these are the people we are having on to talk about, these auteur showrunners, and lucky for all of us that they're geniuses,
But I think also, what was really interesting, I think, about the people who created the shows for HBO, especially when I was there, is that almost all of them came from network television, and they were all schooled in the rigors of that world, and they said, these are the rules I want to break. And I think knowing what the form is and then knowing where you want to take it was invaluable to them. And I think auteur is how we really refer to them, because they really were, we thought of these as sort of handcrafted shows that people really could put their stamp. They could be in the edit room, they could be in the writer's room, they could be on the set. It was a great life for you, I know, to do them. But I mean,
And David Chase started in comedy, broadcast comedy. So it's to have met, and I think it was, in hearing him talk about it, he was so burned out by,
doing 22 episodes.
Well, that, and also just the network sort of meddling in the notes and everything. It's probably what drove so much of this project.
Yeah, I think there was a lot to say. Like, this is how I know how to do this. Just let me do it.
Well, and there were these begats, like Matt Weiner worked on Sopranos, so that begets Mad Men.
Of course.
And many people we have come on our show with these amazing series were, they kill it on another show, and then they have the juice to get their own thing, and sometimes they are also brilliant auteurs.
Yeah.
Kim, I loved when Damon was talking about syndication and how it was sort of disrupted by all these serialized shows. And back in the day, you would, like, ER was a perfect show to serialize, because it was, every week 3 or 4 different cases. Did you sense at the time that the syndication business was sort of being disrupted by this?
Well, they didn't like serialized shows. They wanted closed-end procedurals. That's why Dick Wolf is richer than everybody we know. Because all those Law and Orders, all those ching-chings, that can be, you don't have to be following along. They don't like something like The Good Wife, where you have to follow and know what's going on. So yeah, it was a big shift, and the networks particularly outside of, I think that was another opportunity for cable. The cable people were thinking, we just want you to pay the subscription fee and be addicted to the serial, whereas the networks were thinking, we just want to sell this thing because we're losing money on the first run, so we need to come back and sell it, and the studios were, and yeah, that's where the roads parted.
And I think what also happened at sort of around that same time was that allowing the networks to own the shows, really.
Right, the laws changed, and now you see it even more so today, where they will kill a show that rates better on a network if they don't own it, for something that rates less well because they own it.
Right.
So it put all that sort of creative juice into a financial equation that didn't go to the network's favor. I think ultimately, creatively, and it redounded to ours.
Definitely.
And I'll never forget when Sopranos was syndicated on A&E, and they had to dub every other word. Tony was saying, "Forget you," like every. I remember I interviewed Terrence Winter around that time because he had just started Boardwalk, and I just found it to be the funniest thing. And he had just been watching episode 2, and I was like, "What is the point of putting this show?"
It's
Although it works really well with Sex and the City, it weirdly works.
It does work on
watch it with the sanitized version, and I'm still into it.
It's on E, and it feels all like fun and frothy. Another theme in the episode that I love is this idea of you can have a successful show that not a lot of people are watching, sort of 30 Rock being, the poster child for that. All these Emmys and I'm wondering, does critical acclaim and can we actually look back now and say you can monetize that? And obviously Breaking Bad had the same situation for the first few years, when not a ton of people were watching it, and then now you look at it, and of course it's a no-brainer. But if you look at those raw numbers, it was not a hugely watched show.
I wish I had gone to some of those budget meetings. To this day, to this day, I don't understand how it's monetized, because even the final episode of Breaking Bad was, just a few years before that, if any network show had the number of viewers we had for our big, giant finale, it would have been canceled.
Right.
It's amazing how the audience has fractured and gotten smaller, and yet the folks making TV seem to be making more money at it than ever. It's magic. It's like vertical. What is hell?
Well, you have this onslaught
vertical
of
marketing,
or
vertical integration, but multi-level marketing. How does this work? It's like Ponzi scheme. How the hell how's this even making money?
Was it Breaking Bad that because of it sold to Netflix? There was a series that sold to Netflix, and so they started running it on Netflix.
That's when everyone discovered it.
And then everybody just said, "Oh my God!" Then your ratings went
Right.
went sky high or went significantly up, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So I mean, Netflix strikes again. I mean, that was the first time we could binge
Right.
a show, really, because they wouldn't let you do that before. I think, although we talked about it earlier, Carolyn, how HBO would do that when the new season would come on of Sopranos. You'd run all the previous episodes.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And it was like I could spend all day watching it. It was like amazing.
And I'm curious, Kim, in all your years covering this business, I mean, when you look at, obviously Tina Fey, Robert Carlock, what they did with 30 Rock, would you say that even though very few people watched that show, that they ultimately benefited financially because of the critical acclaim? I mean, did it get her an overall deal at NBC because?
Well, I'm sure that they tried to keep her and Amy Poehler, talents like that. Okay. They bring you more than just money. They bring you prestige. They win awards. They're cool.
They bring you other talent,
all of those things, all those things really do matter. So I think they will do things in the movie studios as well that they don't necessarily think they're going to make a fortune, but it makes the talent happy to feel that they're part of something that is doing something good.
Right. And how would you say, and this is for anyone, to what degree did the advent of Twitter help and hurt all of this? Because I know Damon Lindelof, he could talk for hours about the abuse that he has suffered at the hands of Twitter trolls. And Vince, of course, wisely has never thrown his hat in that horrible ring.
I don't know.
But in terms of the show creators,
just taking it to movies, Mark Johnson, who works with Vince, told me once about these kids sitting behind these kids in a movie theater, and a trailer would come on, and they would make this. They'd go, "No," and they'd be with their phones in their hands, and they would be destroying the movie on the basis of. I mean, that would be the beginning of bad word of mouth. And I think that instantaneous, it can help obviously when you're buzzy, but it can be. I think it can be pretty bad too if people start. Like sort of spraying it with uncoolness.
Do you think show creators should be having that constant dialogue with fans? Like Shonda is, very famous for, like she'll be live tweeting during, obviously Scandal's gone, but back in the day. What do you think, Vince?
I think it's up to the show creator, the showrunner. I think Shonda Rhimes clearly knows what she's doing. She's wonderful at what she does, and she's clearly good at it, and if she enjoys it furthermore, which I don't think you could possibly do that for an extended time period if you didn't actually get something out of it, some enjoyment. To me, I'd rather get root canal without it. I'm not into any of that stuff. So.
And Tim, are you in social media at all?
A little bit, but I mean, no, and I don't know. I mean, was reading about Westworld and how the interaction between the fans and the social media. I'm mixed about it. I think the creative spirit behind a show is what makes the show good. I don't know that it's necessarily the interaction. I mean, but as you say with Sean, if the author gets something out of it, that's great.
But it's soap. I mean, a Scandal and those shows are soap,
right.
So it's fun to do that. But I wouldn't want to see that on a show like Mad Men or Breaking Bad. That would put me off completely.
Yeah, I don't think Matt Weiner would have been.
I think it would be a bad idea.
He was a bit of a perfectionist.